My name is Ethan Cole. I'm 31 years old, and on my wedding day, I found my father sitting in a plastic folding chair next to a service cart with dirty dishes on it, while my future wife's family filled the front table with champagne glasses and laughter. Table 1 was supposed to have my parents on it. Center of the room, right in front of the dance floor, exactly where I'd approved it 3 weeks before the wedding. Instead, someone moved them to table 16, the last table, tucked behind a column, 10 feet from the kitchen entrance, where the servers kept pushing through with trays and the sound of industrial dishwashers ran underneath every conversation. My father is a man who spent 32 years pouring concrete. He has hands that look like old leather and a back that gave out at 53, but he never missed a single day while I was in school. Not one. He drove me to every baseball practice, every college visit, every job interview in a truck that had no air conditioning and a cracked dashboard. He wore his one good blazer to my wedding, the navy one he bought for my college graduation and had dry cleaned twice since then. That man was sitting next to a trash can at my wedding. And when I found out who did it and why, and heard my own fiancée say the words she said, I made a decision in that hallway that changed everything. Not just the wedding, everything after it. I want to tell you what she said, because the moment I heard it, something went completely quiet inside me. Not the dramatic silence you see in movies. Something colder. The kind of stillness that only comes when the last thing you were still hoping for disappears. Stay with me, because this story isn't really about a seating chart. It's about what happens when the person you chose shows you, in one sentence, exactly who they are. I grew up in Denton Falls, Indiana. Population just under 11,000. The kind of town where the hardware store owner remembers what gauge wire you bought 2 years ago and asks how the project turned out. My parents, Gary and Ruth Cole, lived in the same house on Sycamore Drive for 28 years. My dad bought it the year I was born, paid it off in 19, and made my mom a garden along the back fence with raised beds he built himself out of cedar planks. Gary Cole was a concrete finisher. Union card since 1988. He worked commercial pours, parking structures, foundations, the kind of work that destroys your knees before you're 50 and your lower back before you're 60. He didn't complain about either. He came home, washed the dust off, and asked what happened in school that day. My mom, Ruth, was a bookkeeper at a small manufacturing firm on Route 40. She kept the accounts for 16 years until the plant downsized, and she moved to part-time at the public library, which she'd tell you herself was the best thing that ever happened to her. We were not wealthy. I knew that. I also never felt it as a deficit, not once, because my parents made a home that had enough of everything that mattered. There was always food. There was always a conversation at dinner. When I made the dean's list my sophomore year at Indiana State, my dad cried in the parking lot of the restaurant where we celebrated. He turned away and pretended he was looking at something across the street. I never said anything about it. Neither did he. That was us. I earned a degree in civil engineering. Started at a mid-sized infrastructure firm in Indianapolis. Worked my way to project manager by 28. By the time I met Vanessa Aldridge, I had an apartment, a reliable car, and a clear sense of who I was and where I came from. I met Vanessa at a firm event. She worked in corporate real estate development. Sharp, confident, the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately understands its geometry. We dated for 11 months before she introduced me to her parents. Warren and Diana Aldridge, Carmel, Indiana. Private school donors, country club members, a lake house 2 hours north that had been in the family since the 70s. Warren had built a commercial real estate portfolio over 30 years. Diana chaired a children's literacy foundation and sat on the board of an arts organization downtown. First time I met Diana, she asked me about my firm, listened politely, and then said, "Engineering, so you're more of a builder type." She smiled when she said it. It wasn't a compliment. I told myself it was just the way she communicated. Formal. Measured. Vanessa said her mother warmed up slowly with people she didn't know. I gave it time. Diana never warmed up. But by then, I was certain I was marrying Vanessa, not her mother. And I believed that distinction would hold. It didn't. The wedding planning started 18 months before the date. From the first meeting, it was clear what this event was going to be. The Aldridges were covering the majority of costs. That fact, once established, became the foundation of every decision that followed. Diana chose the venue, a private estate outside of Carmel with a formal reception hall and a catering team that didn't publish their pricing online. She chose the florist. She chose the photographer. When my mom offered to make her apple cake as a dessert option, the kind that had been at every Cole family gathering since before I was born, Diana said, "We're going with the patisserie in Broad Ripple." "But that's so thoughtful, Ruth." She said it the way you say no to someone you don't want to argue with. Vanessa's answer every time I raised something was the same. "Let her have this, Ethan. After the wedding, it's our life. Just let her have the planning." I made the calculation that most people make when they're trying to preserve a future: concede the present, protect what comes next. I kept giving ground. I thought it was strategic. I didn't understand, yet, that some people read concession as permission. The seating chart was one of the few things I insisted on personally. Table 1. My parents, Vanessa's parents, my Aunt Carol who had driven from Cincinnati, Vanessa's grandparents. That was the agreement. I saw the printed chart. I signed off on it. June 7th, the morning of the wedding. I was in the groom's suite at the estate by 9:30. Jacket pressed, shoes shined, a level of calm that surprised me because I was genuinely happy. Whatever tension had built during the planning, I'd filed it under temporary. Today was the day everything became ours. My best man, Marcus, came in around 10:45. He'd been walking the grounds. "Hey." He closed the door behind him. "Have you looked at the reception hall yet?" "No." "What?" "Go look at the seating." I went. The room was already set. 40 tables, white linen, tall floral centerpieces, candles that wouldn't be lit until the evening. I found table 1 immediately. Place cards in brass holders, the good ones, heavy cream stock with gold lettering. I picked up the first card. Warren Aldridge. The second, Diana Aldridge. Third, fourth, fifth. Aldridge family. Business associates. The Harmon couple, Warren's development partner. The Fieldings, Diana's closest friends from the foundation. 9 cards. No Coles. I checked tables 2, 3, 5. Nothing. I found them at table 16. Gary Cole. Ruth Cole. Aunt Carol. Squeezed between the column and the kitchen entrance, with a plastic folding chair substituted in where a ballroom chair hadn't fit. A service cart sat 3 feet away with used cocktail glasses from the setup crew still stacked on it. I went to find Vanessa. She was in the bridal suite with her mother and 2 bridesmaids. I asked to speak with her privately. Diana stayed in the room. The seating chart was changed. My parents are at table 16. Vanessa looked at her mother for a fraction of a second. Just a flicker. Then back at me. "Mom made a few adjustments this morning. The Harmons needed to be at the head table because of the speech timing. The Harmons are business contacts, Vanessa. My parents are my parents." Diana spoke then, calm, precise. "Ethan, the front table sets a tone. Warren's partners expect a certain configuration. It's just logistics. Move them back." Vanessa touched my arm. "After dinner, I'll make sure your parents are acknowledged. I'll ask Derek to mention them in the toasts. It'll be fine." "It won't be fine. Move them back now." She looked at me with something I had not seen before. Not anger. Not guilt. Inconvenience. Like I was a variable that had stopped cooperating. "Ethan, there are 200 guests arriving in 90 minutes. Let's not do this right now." I walked out. I needed air. I went through a side corridor toward the garden entrance, and that's when I heard it. Diana's voice from the room I'd just passed. The door was cracked. She wasn't whispering. "He's being completely unreasonable, Vanessa. Your father's partners are at that table. That's where the optics matter." Vanessa's voice, I know. His parents, sweetheart. His father is a construction worker. What exactly does it look like to have him sitting front and center next to the Harmons and the Fieldings? A pause. Then Vanessa, "I know, Mom. You're right. It just didn't need to be this dramatic." Diana. "Table 16 is perfectly comfortable. They won't even notice." Vanessa. "He noticed." Diana. "He'll settle down. Men always do when they realize the day is bigger than the argument." I stood in that corridor with my hand flat against the wall and listened to the woman I was about to marry agree that my father, a man who had poured concrete in July heat and February cold for 3 decades to give me the start I had, was a liability to the optics of her family's table. She didn't defend him. She didn't say, "Mom, that's not fair." She said, "You're right. I need you to understand something about that moment." It wasn't rage. It wasn't the dramatic scene you'd expect. It went very still inside me, the way a room goes still when the power cuts out and all the background noise you'd stopped hearing suddenly disappears and you realize how loud it was. I thought about my father's hands. I thought about the blazer. I thought about the parking lot outside that restaurant 8 years ago and him turning away toward the street. And I thought, he is sitting next to a service cart with dirty glasses on it while I stand here and find out the woman I'm marrying thinks his presence damages the optics of her family's event. I walked back to the groom's suite. Marcus was there. I need you to find out if the marriage license has been signed. He looked at me. Ethan, has it been signed? No. The plan was during the reception, at the sweetheart table. Then nothing is legal yet. Marcus sat down slowly. What are you thinking? I'm thinking my dad is sitting next to the kitchen in a folding chair, and the woman I'm marrying just told her mother she knows why. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you need from me? Stay close. I went to table 16. Dad was there already. Blazer buttoned, posture straight. The way he sat in situations where he was uncomfortable but refused to give anyone the satisfaction of knowing it. Mom was reading the menu card. Aunt Carol was scrolling her phone. Hey. Dad looked up. He read my face the way he always did, without rushing it. You okay, son? No. But I will be. I need you to stay here for about 20 minutes. Ethan. His voice dropped. Don't do anything on our account. I'm not doing it on your account, Dad. He held my eyes for a long moment. He didn't argue. That was his way of telling me he understood. I found Marcus near the entrance to the reception hall. The guests were filing in. The string quartet was playing something soft and elaborate. Diana Aldridge was at table 1, laughing with Patricia Harmon, gesturing at the centerpiece. Warren was shaking hands with someone in a gray suit. The room looked exactly like what it was designed to look like, an event where certain people mattered and certain people were tolerated at a distance. I looked across the hall at table 16. My dad had folded his hands on the table. My mom had put her program down and was looking at the floral arrangement with the particular expression she got when she was trying to find something good to focus on. The service cart was still 3 feet away. I walked to the stage. I didn't take the microphone dramatically. I just picked it up, and Marcus gave Derek a look that kept him from intervening. The room settled in about 15 seconds. I want to thank everyone for being here. My voice came out level. 7 years of project management, 12 years of watching my father absorb difficult things without flinching. I had the range for this. I know you all came to see a wedding. I owe you the truth about what's happening instead. 200 people, and not one of them moved. My name is Ethan Cole. Before anything else I am Gary and Ruth Cole's son. I paused. My parents are at table 16. I'd like everyone to look at table 16. 200 heads turned. The room found my parents at the back, near the column, near the kitchen door, the service cart still visible beside them. My dad didn't look away. He met the room's attention the way he met everything, directly, without apology, though I could see the set of his jaw, and I knew what it cost him. 3 weeks ago, I approved a seating chart that put my parents at table 1. This morning, that changed. Someone walked in here before the guests arrived and moved every Cole Place card to the last table in the room. I wasn't told. I didn't approve it. I let that breathe for a moment. That person is Diana Aldridge. Diana's face, which had been arranged in its default expression of composed authority, went still. When I confronted my fiancée about it, she told me it was handled. When I heard her speaking privately with her mother 20 minutes ago, she said her mother was right. That my father, a man who spent 32 years pouring concrete to give me the foundation, literal and otherwise, to be standing in this room, was a problem for the optics of the front table. Warren Aldridge set his glass down. Patrick Harmon leaned back in his chair. My dad bought this blazer for my college graduation. My mom drove 4 hours round trip every other weekend for 2 years of college because she said the dining hall food wasn't enough. These people are my table 1. They have always been my table 1. I looked directly at Vanessa. She was standing near the edge of the dance floor. She hadn't sat down. Her face had gone through several expressions in the past 90 seconds and had arrived at something I recognized now as the same inconvenience I'd seen in the bridal suite. Vanessa, I heard what you said, and I need you to know that I'm not angry. I'm just clear now. Clear in a way I couldn't get to during 18 months of letting things go that I should have held on to. The room was completely silent. I could hear the candle flames. I cannot sign a marriage license with someone who heard her mother call my father a liability and said, "You're right. That's not a person I can build a life with." Not because I can't forgive it, but because it wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And I heard it. I set the microphone down on the stand. Carefully, the way my dad always set tools down when a job was finished. Then I walked across the room to table 16. Dad stood up when I got there. He didn't say anything. He put his hand on the back of my neck the way he used to when I was a kid, and something had gone wrong that neither of us had words for yet. Mom held my arm. Aunt Carol was already grabbing her purse. Marcus had the car ready. We walked out. All of us. Past the dessert station, past the string quartet, which had stopped playing, past 200 faces that watched without making a sound. Behind me, I heard Diana say something sharp and controlled. I heard Vanessa call my name once. I didn't stop. The door to the estate closed behind us, and the last thing I registered was the gravel under my good shoes and my father walking beside me in his graduation blazer in the June evening air, and not one of us speaking because none of us needed to. The marriage license was never signed. Marcus confirmed it with the officiant that night. Legally, nothing had happened. No filing, no record, no proceeding required. I walked away from a wedding that never became a marriage. 2 weeks later, I was back at my apartment in Indianapolis. The custody question didn't apply. There was no child, no shared lease, accounts entirely separate. Marcus connected me with an attorney anyway, just to ensure clean edges. There were none needed. The Harmons pulled out of a development partnership with Warren the following month. I didn't hear this from anyone connected to me. I heard it from a colleague who knew someone at Warren's firm. Apparently, Patrick Harmon had made some calls. 200 people go home and talk, and not all of them are strangers to consequence. Diana stepped back from her foundation chairmanship that fall. Not publicly, not dramatically. She simply wasn't listed on the annual gala program. These things have a way of resolving themselves when the people who watch decide they've seen enough. I didn't orchestrate any of it. I didn't post on social media. I didn't call anyone. I told my parents what happened. I told Marcus, and I went back to work. 14 months later, here's my life. I promoted to senior project manager in March. My team poured the foundation for a new community health center outside of Denton Falls, which feels like the kind of symmetry that you don't get to plan. My parents came to the site visit. Dad walked the perimeter and asked 3 technical questions that impressed the foreman, which I knew would happen and enjoyed anyway. Mom finally started the garden she'd been talking about for 4 years. Dad built the raised beds last October out of cedar planks, same as the ones along the back fence when I was growing up. I haven't spoken to Vanessa directly since June 7th. We have no shared children, no shared property, nothing that requires it. I know from mutual contacts that she's well. I genuinely wish her a life that asks more of her than convenience. Sunday dinners at the Cole house are still the best part of my week. The table doesn't match the chairs. The overhead light in the kitchen flickers when it's cold, and Dad says every time he'll fix it next week. There are no place cards, no string quartet, no charger plates. Marcus comes most weeks now. He brings beer and argues with my dad about football and loses every time. Last Sunday, my dad passed me the bread basket and said, without looking up from his plate, "You did good, son. That night. You did good." He has not said it before or since. He didn't need to say it more than once. I'm not telling you this story to hand you a lesson. I don't know your situation. I don't know what you've agreed to let go of, what you've told yourself was a small battle, or what table you've been sitting at while convincing yourself the view from the back was fine. But I'll tell you what I know. When the person you're supposed to build a life with hears someone call your father a liability and says you're right, that is not a rough patch. That is not something that gets better with time, or a difficult conversation, or a weekend away. That is the answer to every question you'll ever have about that person and where you stand in their life. You can love someone and still not belong in their hands. And if there is someone in your life right now, a parent, a friend, anyone who drove through bad weather to show up for you, who saved 6 months for the right clothes to sit in a room where you'd be, who turned away in a parking lot so you wouldn't see him cry, that person is your table one. They were always your table one. Don't let anyone rearrange that. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm a project manager and Gary and Ruth Cole's son, in that order of importance. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment in Indianapolis with a view of a parking structure I helped design, which is either ironic or perfect depending on who you ask. There are no place cards on my table, but every person at it belongs there. And that's the only seating chart that has ever mattered.